I'd like to take questions now. Can we keep them as questions more than statements, please? I'm getting waving from the back. There are Facebook questions as well that we won't forget to bring in. So short and to the point questions, please.
Добрый день. Я по последней презентации...
Wait one moment. We don't have our earpieces.
Okay, I'm wait.
Should I go? Sure.
Okay.
Thanks. Short and to the point. Thanks, Staci. Just a question about TAF. Does Gilead have plans to file with the EMA for TAF? And if so, how do you see it being additive to the generic Truvada that exists? And will it be available in generic form?
I think it's on.
So your question was three. The first one is, will we be doing studies in cis women? So, no? What was your first one? I'm sorry. You gotta, I'm old.
Sorry. Okay, so does Gilead have plans to file with the EMA to market TAF in Europe? And if so, will it be available immediately in generic? And how do you see that? If not, how do you see it as being additive to Europe when Truvada is already almost 100% effective?
Great, sorry. I think I got lost in some of the acronym. I'm going to punt it to my European colleague because I am US based. And Peter Bohr.
Yeah, thanks, Staci. So I work in Europe, so I'm probably best to answer that question. So I can't see who asked the question, actually. So the current plan is definitely to file, and so obviously there's a lot of negotiation that happens with that, but the current timing is early in 2020. In terms of your other question, obviously access is a separate process, and that's dependent on what happens at a country level. So in terms of the pricing, so as you know, in most countries, in Europe at least, most of the TDF that's being used is in generic form. So the question will become at a country by country level, how do we roll that out? So we don't have those answers yet because it's, there's 25 different ways you can cut it. But our focus at this point is that we understand that you need to license the medication first before you can even entertain those discussions. But we are thinking at the moment about how that may play out, but it's way too early to answer that. The process to update the license will take to get the package together will take a few months, and then to actually get the approval, if it does get approval, will take another few months. So in that period over the next 9 to 12 months, we will firm up our response in terms of the other questions that you asked.
Okay, if the panel would like to put their earpieces in. Yesterday it was on channel 5. And the volume is right down low, and then you can push the volume up to the volume that you want. Is it still on channel 5 today? Yeah? Okay. And then the volume on the other side is right down low, and you push it up as you want it. Okay, your question, please.
I would like to express my thanks for the last presentation. It was really quite uplifting because this is something that we have been waiting for a long time. That's really great. But I have a question. I know there are pilot studies and trials and so on that are ongoing, but what about the resistance? I kind of understood that, but many people are taking counter-tuberculosis treatment, and some of the ART drugs are being blocked when they take anti-TB products. And my second question is, if you have OST replacement therapy, would that be compliant or somehow compatible with this therapy? Because we have quite a few people who use drugs among our clients. So thank you very much in advance.
Yes, thank you for the question. So as you have rightly believed and stated, so we have done some interaction studies with some of the TB medicines. So there is an interaction with rifampin. So there would be a dose adjustment needed with cabotegravir. Again, this is something I think we'll need to address after phase 3, but there's certainly the option to administer additional oral pills during the time of TB therapy. So that's one potential option. Another interaction study was done with rifabutin, and there was less of an interaction observed with rifabutin. So that might actually be a possibility to be co-administered with the injectable. We've talked about doing a study with rifapentine, but I think that its price and availability make it difficult in certain settings. So I think we don't have anything in the books right now, but I think that there are some ways that we can get around some of the interactions with TB therapy.
And the second question about people who inject drugs or use other drugs, whether there's any drug-drug interaction.
So we have not done a drug interaction study with any. I mean, it would be dozens of possible medicines that you could look at for recreational drugs to do an interaction study. So we have not done anything to this point. It is something that, again, will have to be looked at after phase 3.
Excuse me, when I talk about OST therapy.
Yeah, sorry, methadone in particular.
Yeah. I don't believe we have done an interaction study with methadone. I can follow up and check, but I don't believe we have.
Okay, thank you. I'm all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we go to our Facebook questions, please? I know there are 3 people waiting here. You will have your chance. Mark, your questions.
Hi, I can't see any of you because my glasses just broke, so bear with me. First question was, could it be that women are downplaying the sexual involvement in order not to be labeled as promiscuous, thus making them at higher risk for HIV? The second question is, what about attrition rates in these studies? Have you seen any women coming out of the trials, and what is the reason for that? And my personal 2 questions are, a few years ago, EATG conducted a research on women's participation in clinical trials, where we identified the barriers which women face to get into and staying onto trials. It's lovely to hear that ViiV has managed to secure 200 places, 200 women every month, if I did hear correctly. How did you manage to get those women into the trial? And what lessons can you sort of teach us from the experience? And last but not least, something which Sindra mentioned on day 1, that we need to recreate and redesign clinical trials because we now have PrEP, and having studies with new PrEP without PrEP would be unethical. How do we go about creating new study designs?
You guys. Mark, can you just, I'm sorry, can you repeat the first question about?
Okay, the first question was...
About promiscuity, women being seen as promiscuous?
Yes, the question which one of our audience raised was, could it be that women are downplaying their sexual involvement in order not to be labeled as promiscuous, thus making them at risk of HIV?
Thank you. Who would like to answer?
We do hear about a stigma of women being labeled, especially in countries where PrEP is only indicated for sex workers. So as they try to expand PrEP, when a woman receives PrEP and tells her family and friends, they're like, oh, that's only for sex workers. So I don't know about women downplaying their risk. I think they're stigmatized for their risk.
I think one of the particular risks that is probably a little bit downplayed is the risk of HIV acquisition through anal sex in women. Because if we look at the various studies, we can see that the self-reported rates of anal receptive intercourse, condomless anal intercourse in women can widely vary, whereas the population is supposedly almost the same in different studies, from 2% to 20 to even almost 30% in some cases, which I think it's one of the risks that can be downplayed in women.
About attrition rates in studies, and how did ViiV manage, what lessons are there to learn for women's participation in studies, women's enrollment?
So the women's study's been quite remarkable in that the retention rates actually out to, I think, week 100 now, which is numerous injections, is greater than 90%. And so, but I think many of us know the caveats of doing research in that population, in that setting, as we've been burned a little bit before, seeing high retention rates in voice and FemPrep, but obviously very, very low rates of product use. We don't have that problem for the cabotegravir trials because it is directly observed therapy. So if they're coming in for their visit, they're getting an injection. We don't know if they're taking their pills at home. We do not know that. I mean, we're doing appropriate plasma and dried blood spot analysis of that, but at least we know they're getting an injection, whether, you know, half of them are getting an active one and half of them are getting a placebo one. But it's the retention rates are extremely encouraging for the women's trial. It's lower, it's still high, but lower for the men. And I think, you know, it'll be years worth of data that'll be analyzed coming out of these trials, but what we're observing in the men's study is so because it's such a young population, it's somewhat chaotic, and we have men who are moving and bouncing around all the time. They show up at different clinics for injections over a lengthy period of time. They will go missing for 6 months and then come back in for an injection. So we're seeing a little bit of everything in the men's study. So it's going to be interesting to look at those data.
And your success in recruiting women, and any lessons you'd like to pass on?
That's more of a question for the HPTN. I mean, we are not the sponsors of this trial, and these are all sites that are part of the HPTN network. And so really, ViiV, you know, we sit on the periphery of this a little bit. So the question really goes more towards the HPTN. I know they've done a lot of community-based work. They've done an awful lot of training. And frankly, I think that there's been a huge amount of the recruitment has been word of mouth and excitement about an injectable option, especially in the African settings. So I think a number of us have heard you know, urban or rural myths about injections in Africa, that there's the belief that they're more potent than taking pills. There's a troubled history with taking pills in that setting from other trials and results, counterfeit medicines, all that kind of stuff. So there's a whole bunch of things that kind of roll up, I think, into the great interest that we've seen in an injectable option.
Thank you. Mark, I'm going to skip over your question about clinical trial design, because I think it was touched on quite a bit in the presentations, and maybe you'd like to follow up with the presenters afterwards, if that's okay. If people could introduce themselves at this microphone and ask their question, please.
I'm Vincent from Paris. I'm from a country where drugs agencies are being more and more cautious on their assessment of new drugs and technologies. they see all of them as a way for pharmaceutical companies to remain to keep a certain level of incomes. And they don't want to pay for that. They want to pay for innovation and new technologies that address remaining issues such as adherence. My question is very easy. Beyond non-inferiority, are you always able to demonstrate that these new drugs and technologies such as long-acting drugs provide an added value to our populations, and in particular those of us struggling the most with adherence for structural reasons?
So we're coming back to trial design.
Yeah, sure. I think this is going to be a key issue for all of us going forward. For any of the new long-acting prevention methods, in men, we will basically have non-inferiority trials. And what we have seen is that HTA assessments are generally only looking at the data in the clinical trial. And so we are going to have engagement with the community to really get HTA agencies to value data not necessarily in the clinical trial on adherence, on other quality of life metrics, because otherwise it's going to be very, very difficult in the era of generic Truvada PrEP to make these new methods widely available. This is going to need to be a concerted effort between the community and the industry to make the case to HTA agencies why, despite the clinical trial requirements, that we have shown that there is a real need and a real added benefit to these new methods. I don't know, Alex, if you want to see anything more.
There are a number of important cost-effectiveness analyses that are planned with the data from the phase 3 trials. And I think we need to reevaluate the calculus for these new therapies that are coming. There might be price differences, but there might be advantages gained in other areas. And I think we've all agreed as panelists that a long-acting injectable is not the silver bullet. We hope that it is going to be just one of many new options that will be available and can be chosen by whatever your particular life situation is at that moment in time, and it might even change 2 years on and you want to try something different. So I think that the calculations now aren't as easy as they used to be, and agree with Paul that there really need to be some new considerations taken into consideration when they think about approval and use of these agents.
Can I come back? So I really think that the community's voice is more impactful in this than the industry's voice. And so we need to have collaboration for you all to help us to figure out what kinds of things that we need to study, what kinds of quality of life metrics are going to be really important. But then we need the community to really make the case as to why these are really important.
And if I may add, I think one of the data that is really overlooked is the results from the satisfaction questionnaire, which is more and more done in this kind of study, and usually the data is a little bit overlooked, and I think we can learn a lot from this questionnaire, and there's probably a room there also for qualitative study for people who are doing that. I am not an expert at qualitative study, but I think there is a room for that here.
Staci, you want to add anything? Okay, if we could come back, we'll take one more from this microphone. Jamie, I see you, and then we'll come back here. Just because the queue's long. Or you want to go first, Jamie, please.
Hi, my name is Jamie. I'm a PrEP user. I'm also a trans man who has sex with men. As far as I'm aware, I've been excluded from every single trial, and I'd like to know why transgender men are not included and what's being done in the future, please.
I think we all can say something about that subject. In the US, for example, the CDC only start counting or giving a category for transgendered men. My apologies. And they say there's 360 transgendered men in the United States. There's 360 in my Rolodex. So I'm the first person to admit it's been an invisible population. We recently opened a request for proposals to look at this population because, again, transgendered men aren't in any of the studies, aren't in any of the literature, and I think can I speak for the whole panel? That this is something we are all trying to increase visibility around. So thank you for bringing this up.
And also, I think some studies have shown that there is some kind of prejudice in the medical community. I'm thinking about a study that showed that most of medical students thought that trans men only have sex with women. And I think this is one part of the problem here.
Don't have sex with women, it is definitely with men. There are more of us out there as well.
Please introduce yourself.
Morning, Yanis Mameletsis, consultant. Thank you to our industry colleagues for your presentations this morning. A question for you, Alex. You noted that obviously these phase 3 trials are looking at efficacy, and you made the point on that they're not looking at effectiveness. So as a company, I'm wondering if you have some ideas as to if you have a sort of the green light, a positive outcome at the end of the day with both of the two big trials, what is your interest or planning around some of the implementation science that can follow? We are at a PrEP in Europe summit, and so when I was looking at your map in the sort of the absence, the paucity of clinical sites for these two trials, I think there's probably an appetite to look at a type of sort of strategic implementation work in many of our countries in the region, particularly where the burden of the epidemic is, namely in Eastern Europe. So maybe we have a few ViiV colleagues in the room, and so if you can speak to that, please. Thank you.
Yes, you rightly noted a gap in the program and that there are no sites in Europe or Australia, for that matter, that were included in the phase 3 program. Unfortunately, that was a product of choosing the HPTN network. Obviously, they focused their work in the regions that you saw on the map and not in Europe and other places. So that is an admitted gap that we will need to go back and fill. Again, assuming that we were able to see a positive outcome. We do, so for probably a couple years now, we have started to what we call plan for success in regions, and admittedly, right now to start with, in the lower and middle income countries, about what would demo projects, implementation science, scale-up work look like. And there's a group that I'm a part of, along with members of the Gates Foundation, CHI, and AVAC, called BioPIC. And the goal of that group is we're working with about 100 global stakeholders, and that's to come up with one single comprehensive plan for all the work that needs to be conducted after phase 3. And so that ranges anywhere from implementation science, demo projects, to engagement with in-country ministries of health, supply chain, guidance, normative guidance groups, service delivery groups, service delivery models. And so there's a tremendous amount of planning that's going on in the lower, middle, and income countries, and we plan to begin to look at that for Europe and the regions, quote unquote, that were left out from phase 3 as well. So again, I think maybe one of the learnings that we that we have from those that have gone before us. So I think we can all admit that the rollout and the speed of rollout of oral Truvada probably has not been as fast as we would like it to have been, and actually considerably slower in some regions than others. So, but what is required is ask people to plan at risk, not knowing the phase 3 results, because once you wait for the phase 3 results, then you've already lost 2 or 3 years of planning. That's how long it takes to begin to scale up these ideas and thoughts and everything. So we have started that work, and we'll move to how we want to address that in Europe sometime very soon.
Yeah, I think when we're obviously from a MSD perspective at a much earlier stage in our development process. So as we are looking forward, one of the questions that we're trying to look at is there a way to do some of the real world effectiveness studies not so delayed from the clinical trials, when we know the limitations of the clinical trials in terms of showing efficacy, but not, especially when you're looking at the limitations of these double-blind, double-dummy studies where you're not really able to look at what is the difference between someone being able to take a long-acting method versus taking a daily method, when the fundamental difference is that one of them is long-acting, but in the trial, you're not really testing that implementation of long-acting versus daily. And so can you do more real-world trials before you have the approval? And that's something that we really want to look at.
Or simultaneously.
Yeah, these are all, again, we're highly constrained in some cases by what the regulators require us to do. And so, it's impossible, even though people told us, well, we want the effectiveness and efficacy answer at the same time. Well, we have to come back and say, well, we can't do that. We can't design that trial and meet the requirements of the regulators to do that. So I think you've heard a couple references to a number of ongoing discussions now with regulators about new trial designs, and I think this is just one of many topics that need to come out, because people want answers, and doing it in a sequential fashion just means time, lots of time, lots of years, many years, to be able to answer all of these and to be able to do some of this work in, serially would be the best way to do it.
I think there's a Facebook question too.
Okay, we are at the top of the hour, so Gus, okay, we're going to take 2 questions, one from Facebook and the last one from this microphone. Nicholas, please. Or Mark, sorry.
Hi again. I've got a question from someone from the Euro-Asian Coalition on Male Health, ECOM. And the question is, to buy Truvada in my country at a medicine national center, it costs 800 per month. If I order generic from the UK, it will cost me €50. So the question is, what is the difference between 2 of the templates, and why do we all promote Truvada? And how much will be the cost of all the new methods that you are now presenting for the general community members?
I'll start with you on that, Staci, and then the others can...
I can only speak for the US, where it's the only country where there is a second drug for prevention and Descovy for PrEP, and the price is parity. So it's the same. But in the US, Truvada is not generic.
Would you like to say something about the availability of generics in Europe and Central Asia, and the possibility to buy generics online compared to the price in the country? I think that was the thrust of the question. Mm.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can answer that question. I mean, obviously the sort of the model around innovation and the price that goes into that, once a product loses exclusivity, obviously the price of that comes down I mean, that's a phenomenon that exists industry-wide across all therapeutic areas. So I think, that's not specific to HIV, it's certainly not specific to PrEP. I'm not sure if I can answer the question beyond that, to be honest. But in terms of the access in Central Asia, I also can't comment on that. We know certainly in Europe that in most countries TDF is now off patent and therefore is at a cheaper price. I think the only thing I can say with, from a Gilead perspective is that, despite that, Gilead will continue to invest in PrEP and education and making sure that product is available where possible, as evidenced by the fact that we do plan to license the TAF-based regimen, even though, as my colleagues say here, access to that is going to be difficult because the current benchmark is a very cheap generic product. So, I'm not sure I can answer beyond that, to be honest.
Just a more specific question, is there any chance of giving a voluntary license for the Central Asian countries with the medicine patent pool, adding it on to the other voluntary licenses that Gilead already has in 115 countries?
So, right, and so, again, it's it's a question that's difficult to unpack. It would be country by country. So I have worked in the developing world, and Gilead, most of you know, has part of the patent pool, first company in the patent pool, did release their license for Truvada, including Truvada for PrEP. And they have gone in and also tried to implement Truvada for PrEP. That doesn't get rid of many of the barriers in those countries. There's still barriers. But if we are talking about Central Asia, it's country by country.
Last question.
My question, Pietro Vinti, Milano Checkpoint, Italy. My question is also about costs for the two new PrEP way of administration, the implant and the long-acting. As these new ways of administering PrEP are going to address the adherence gap that we have observed, and as this adherence gap is observed mostly in the most poor and vulnerable populations, how do you think that the cost of these two new PrEP methods will be competitive with generic Truvada, or what? I mean, I'd like to have a comment on that.
I think this is mainly for Alex and for Staci, who would like to go first.
Also for ViiV and for Merck.
Sure, ViiV and Merck, okay, all three of you. Who would like to go first?
Yeah, it's a difficult question for me to answer at the moment. We are in a number of exploratory discussions right now with generic manufacturers for the long-acting injectable and looking at some other service delivery models. So it's obviously we want to bring the cost to as low as possible. So I can't really say right now, I'm sorry. But it is something that we continue to work on, as well as more efficiencies in the manufacturing process. So we're working on it right now.
Yeah, we are, as I said, in phase 1 and phase 2, so it's really far too early to talk about any kind of commercialization plans. I would say that as a company and as an industry, we've tried, I think, over the past 10, 15 years to really work at how do we increase access to these medicines in collaboration with global efforts to increase access, especially in conjunction with the work of the Global Fund and with the work of PEPFAR. That has required pricing strategies that differentially price between the developed world and the developing world. I think we need to anticipate that that will continue to be the model going forward. And so when you talk about, is there going to be a difference between the price of a generic Truvada in Italy and a new medicine, I would anticipate that that would be the case, yes.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up to that, we've got several representatives
Merck
from
can't speak
countries.
for us.
Oh, okay. I'm coming back to you, Staci. One moment. We've got several countries represented in the room that are transitioning out of Global Fund funding. And I would think, maybe I'm speaking for you, that you're interested to know if there are new access plans once the Global Fund stops funding drug purchases, if companies are already anticipating that.
So I think that most companies don't necessarily price, their access strategies are not fundamentally dependent on where the Global Fund is or is not. Some of the company policies, and each of them can speak for themselves, are based on criteria, whether it's GNI per capita or incidence or prevalence, but not fundamentally as to whether it is a Global Fund recipient country or not. I think as these products are rolled out, obviously the Global Fund is looking at transitioning plans in countries, and one of those is making sure that access is maintained to products that have been available under Global Fund programs. So I would assume that the Global Fund will continue in those transition planning efforts as countries move towards transition.
Sorry, Staci, I interrupted your previous... Oh.
No, I was just joking that, I mean, there's two things in your question. One is new delivery models. And I think everyone said we can't see in the future what new delivery models are, and I didn't come to introduce Gilead's new delivery models. Gilead has 2 pills available for PrEP, one in only one country and only for a week. So let me focus on Truvada for PrEP. We're looking at, when people are asking about pricing, and I'm not saying I'm the pricing specialist, but we're also looking at multiple factual things in multiple different countries. In developing world, we all work hand in hand with PEPFAR. We work with the Global Fund. We offer either very cheap branded or generics in developing world. The question comes country per country. And so I don't think it's an easy answer to even look at this, the first drug we have available for PrEP, let alone kind of guess what's going to happen with different delivery models, especially at different dosing, whether it's monthly, twice a month, and then asking again, what will that look like with generic? Because also generic manufacturing is not guaranteed that it's possible for every delivery model. So I understand, and I empathize because I'm constantly working in different countries trying to find models that work. But I don't think we can give one general answer across the board.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank our panel and our speakers this morning. It is now time for coffee. Thank you. Round of applause.